Lyra had grown up within the towering spires of the Valen house, an influential and wealthy family among their alien species. To outsiders, the Valens appeared to be a family bound by honor, tradition, and loyalty. However, Lyra knew the truth. From a young age, she had felt the invisible weight of her family's ambition pressing down on her. Every smile, every pat on the head, every word of affection carried an unspoken expectation. She existed to serve the family's goals. Her thoughts, desires, and dreams were considered secondary, or worse, inconvenient. The Valen society was structured rigidly. Status, wealth, and influence determined one's worth, and the family's standing had always been a priority over personal bonds. Lyra's parents and older siblings treated her with a peculiar mixture of pride and condescension. They spoke of her as if she were both heir and asset, a future that would reflect glory on the house or, failing that, a commodity to be traded. Lyra's upbringing had been one of careful observation, learning etiquette, diplomacy, and the complex dance of family politics, but always under the shadow of conditional love. As Lyra matured, the family's true intentions became more evident. They began speaking in hushed tones about the opportunity that had arisen, an opportunity to profit by selling her into the interstellar slave trade. In their eyes, she was nothing more than a valuable item, one whose sale could bolster the house's standing and wealth in ways that mere alliances could not. To them, this was pragmatic and justified. To Lyra, it was betrayal of the deepest kind. The very people who had claimed to love her, the people who had raised her, were now preparing to send her to a life of servitude and exploitation, as if her existence had ever been theirs to trade. The realization hit her with a wave of shock and disbelief. How could her own family, her blood, treat her as property? Was all the advice, all the guidance, all the conditional support she had received just preparation for a life they no longer intended to share with her? She felt a crushing sense of loneliness, the sort that comes when the foundation of trust is ripped away. Lyra had always believed that family, no matter how strict or ambitious, would never abandon her entirely. Now she saw that she had been naive. In the cold calculus of the Valens, love and loyalty were secondary to profit. The day of her departure was terrifyingly surreal. The corridors of the transport vessel were metallic and unyielding, echoing with the mechanical hum of engines and the occasional footsteps of guards. Other captives moved silently, their expressions a mix of resignation and despair. Lyra observed them and felt a kinship, a shared suffering that transcended species and origin. She realized she was not alone in being betrayed by the universe or by those she had trusted. Yet this realization did little to soothe the ache in her chest. As the transport ship launched into the void, light years of empty space stretching ahead, Lyra stared out at the stars with a fragile hope. Somewhere in the galaxy, she thought, perhaps someone could see her not as a commodity, not as a tool, not as an asset, but as an individual with a mind, a heart, and a spirit. This hope, though faint, was the ember that refused to die in the face of her fear and sorrow. She did not yet know that her deliverance would come not from her own species, not from the political structures that govern the galaxy, but from a human, a species alien to her in every way but capable of courage, compassion, and unpredictability. Lyra's mind oscillated between despair and cautious anticipation. She reviewed every lesson she had been taught: diplomacy, observation, restraint. Every skill seemed suddenly relevant, not for negotiation or status, but for survival. She understood that the galaxy was merciless, that power determined fate, and that her only hope might lie in the one thing she had always been taught to distrust: outsiders, and particularly humans. As the transport vessel silently cut through the void toward the slave market orbiting Thrin, Lyra braced herself. She did not know what awaited her, nor did she know if she would survive the cruel bargaining and exploitation that defined the slave trade. Yet, within the fear, a small spark persisted. It was the belief that her life was not over, that perhaps someone out there, someone human, unpredictable, fearless, might recognize her as more than property. This ember of hope would sustain her as she journeyed into the unknown, setting the stage for a rescue that would forever change the course of her life. After the long, cold journey aboard the transport vessel, Lyra arrived at the infamous slave market orbiting the mining planet of Thrin. The market was a sprawling, chaotic hub of commerce where the galaxy's most unscrupulous traders bartered over living beings as if they were commodities. The air shimmered with the glow of trading stalls, neon lights reflecting off metallic surfaces, and the hum of engines and alien chatter created an overwhelming symphony of greed and calculation. Every corner of the market was alive with opportunity for profit, every transaction a test of dominance and cunning. Lyra was herded into a holding pen, along with dozens of other captives. She scanned the crowd, noting the despair etched on their faces, species of all shapes and sizes, each bound in some form of restraint, each stripped of dignity. It was a cruel theater, one where the captives were both spectacle and inventory, observed, evaluated, and assigned a price. Though fear and sorrow surged within her, Lyra refused to give up hope. Her mind, honed by years of Valen House discipline, began to analyze her surroundings, noting guards' patrol patterns, trade routes, and even subtle signs of weakness among the market operators. Survival demanded awareness, and she had been trained to observe. It was in this setting of tension and dehumanization that Captain Elias Kane, a human mercenary, made his entrance. Humans were a rare presence in this part of the galaxy, and their reputation preceded them. Stories of human courage, recklessness, and adaptability had spread across interstellar channels. A human could confront overwhelming odds, improvise, in ways other species couldn't predict, and defy convention in battle and negotiation. Kane embodied this reputation fully. Tall, confident, and unflinchingly focused, he surveyed the market with sharp, calculating eyes, clearly unbothered by the chaos surrounding him. When Kane's gaze fell upon Lyra, something about her stopped him. It was not her beauty alone. Though her Valen features were striking, the iridescent glow of her skin, the piercing clarity of her eyes, but her defiance, her spirit that persisted even in captivity. Unlike many who had been broken by the system, she carried herself with a posture that said, "I am still here. I am still myself." Kane, recognizing that spark of individuality and courage, made a decision that shocked onlookers. He would intervene. Kane approached the trading booth and with precision offered the price demanded for Lyra's freedom. It was a sum significant enough to silence murmurs among the merchants, yet Kane did not hesitate. The transaction was completed, but the market's enforcers, accustomed to ensuring captives were returned to their buyers, reacted aggressively. Most would have cowered, but Kane's human audacity came to the forefront. Within moments, he neutralized threats with unmatched skill, combining physical prowess with tactical ingenuity. Guards were incapacitated, security systems bypassed, and Lyra, for the first time in her life, truly experienced freedom. Despite the swift action, Kane did not overwhelm Lyra with attention or demand gratitude. He understood that trust could not be forced, that trauma required patience. He offered protection, not possession, safety, not ownership. Lyra, still wary and stunned by the rapid turn of events, observed this human, so different from the alien species she had known. Unlike her family, Kane did not see her as a commodity or a pawn. He saw her as a person, capable, intelligent, and deserving of agency. As they departed the market and moved toward his ship, Lyra's mind was a whirlwind of emotions: disbelief, relief, lingering fear, and a flicker of curiosity. Could someone truly act with selflessness in a galaxy where survival and profit were supreme? Humans, it seemed, were unpredictable in ways that could be advantageous, and in this moment, profoundly inspiring. Kane's actions also demonstrated a fundamental trait of humanity that Lyra would come to admire: courage combined with empathy. He did not act recklessly. He calculated, he anticipated, and he protected, but always with an awareness of the human cost and the value of life, alien or otherwise. This combination was something rare in a galaxy dominated by species who prioritized hierarchy, greed, or reputation over morality. By the time Lyra stepped onto Kane's ship, the experience had already begun to transform her. The chains of her family's betrayal were still fresh, but the reality of freedom, of someone fighting, for her purely because it was the right thing to do, began to reshape her perspective. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope that survival did not have to be solitary, that there were beings in the galaxy willing to stand against oppression for the sake of justice, and that perhaps, just perhaps, the human beside her might be more than a rescuer. He could be an ally, a protector, and even in time, a partner. After her dramatic rescue from the Thrin slave market, Lyra found herself aboard Captain Elias Kane's ship, a sleek human vessel designed for speed, maneuverability, and survival in the harshest reaches of space. The hum of engines and the faint vibration through the deck were constant reminders that she was no longer in the suffocating grip of her family or the slave trade. Yet freedom, she realized, brought its own challenges. She had been betrayed, sold, and threatened with a life as someone else's property. And while Kane had rescued her, she could not immediately shed the armor of distrust that had been forged over a lifetime of caution and fear. At first, Lyra remained distant, observing Kane and the ship with careful eyes. Every gesture, every word was scrutinized for hidden motives. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but she had been taught to read intent, and years of living under Vaylon manipulation had sharpened her perception. Kane noticed her hesitancy but did not attempt to force interaction. Instead, he allowed her space, demonstrating a form of patience and respect that was foreign to her. In the galaxy she had known, power and intimidation often defined relationships, but Kane's approach was different. He was firm when necessary, but gentle when dealing with her personal boundaries, creating an environment where trust could begin to grow naturally. The days that followed were filled with travel, observation, and teaching. Kane introduced Lyra to the practical skills required to survive in a universe that was both beautiful and perilous. Navigation through asteroid belts, recognition of threats from hostile species, emergency medical procedures, and the basics of ship maintenance. But beyond survival, Kane offered something even more valuable: validation of her intelligence and autonomy. He asked her opinions on strategic decisions, sought her input when evaluating potential trade or rescue missions, and treated her as a partner rather than a subordinate. For Lyra, this was revolutionary. She had never been consulted, never had, her thoughts valued. The simple act of being asked for her perspective began to erode the wall of distrust that had guarded her heart for so long. As they traveled together, small moments fostered connection. They shared meals in the ship's compact galley, where Kane spoke of human history, exploration, and the oddities of his own culture. Lyra began to see humor and warmth in a species she had previously regarded as chaotic and primitive. She laughed at his jokes, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes freely, discovering a sensation she had not felt in years: joy without fear or expectation. Kane, in turn, noticed her reactions, appreciating her intelligence, wit, and insight. Their interactions were not forced or contrived. They evolved organically, grounded in mutual respect and curiosity. Trust began to take root in subtle ways. Lyra confided in Kane about fragments of her past: her family's betrayal, her fears of being controlled, and her dreams of a life where she could be free to make her own choices. Cain listened without judgment, without attempting to fix her, which reinforced her growing sense that humans, unlike her family, could value and respect others for who they truly were. In this shared vulnerability, a connection was born, not instant, not flawless, but genuine and deliberate. The emotional bond between them deepened as they faced minor perils on their journey. Skirmishes with space pirates, sudden navigational hazards, and encounters with dangerous wildlife on remote planets tested their coordination and reliance on one another. Each challenge reinforced Lyra's realization that Cain's bravery was not just physical, it was moral. He risked himself not for glory, not for gain, but to protect those who could not protect themselves, including her. In these moments, admiration blossomed into something more profound. By the end of this period, Lyra's perspective on humanity had shifted dramatically. She recognized their unpredictability as strength, their courage as inspiring, and their empathy as transformative. Cain, through his actions and patience, had begun to repair not only the immediate wounds of captivity, but the deeper scars left by betrayal and exploitation. The human's presence became a source of safety and comfort, and gradually the initial barrier of distrust eroded into tentative trust. What began as cautious observation transformed into genuine connection. Lyra found herself smiling more freely, participating actively in decision-making, and feeling a spark of warmth in Cain's presence. Cain, observing her growth and resilience, began to feel admiration and respect for her, not as a rescued captive, but as a capable, intelligent partner. The foundation of love was quietly forming, built on trust, mutual respect, and the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. In essence, Part 3 is the transition from survival to partnership, from fear to trust. Even as Lyra and Captain Elias Cain grew closer, the shadow of her past loomed over them. The Veylan house, incensed by the loss of their property, had not forgotten or forgiven. In the galaxy, word traveled fast, and families like hers wielded power not only through wealth but through intimidation, influence, and fear. Lyra had escaped physical captivity, but the social and political chains remained as the Veylans sought to reclaim what they considered theirs. Their pursuit was relentless, fueled by pride, anger, and the need to preserve their reputation. The first warning came subtly. Messages intercepted in their ship's communications channels hinted at distant agents tracking them. Strange ships shadowed their path at odd intervals. Lyra's instincts, honed from years of navigating Veylan politics, immediately recognized the signals of a targeted hunt. Her body reacted as it had during her initial betrayal: tension, alertness, a racing mind. For the first time, she realized that freedom from the slave market did not equate to permanent safety. The Veylans' influence could stretch across sectors, and their desire to reclaim her was as much about pride as profit. Cain, ever observant, noticed the subtle signs of her unease. Unlike her family, he did not attempt to override her emotions or belittle her fears. He listened, questioned, and formulated strategies that integrated Lyra's knowledge of her own family's methods. Here, the story emphasizes the hallmark of humanity in HFY fashion: collaboration, respect for another's insight, and courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Cain's trust in Lyra's judgment was not condescending. It was earned and mutual, a stark contrast to the manipulations she had endured all her life. The confrontation came sooner than expected. Through a combination of tracking and intelligence gathered from various channels, the Veylan house located them and issued a direct challenge: return Lyra immediately or face consequences. The message was clear, steeped in threats that ranged from economic sanctions to violent retribution. Most would have crumbled, but Cain's response was characteristically human in its audacity. He refused to negotiate under duress. Instead, he prepared to confront the Valens, combining tactical precision with the unpredictability that made humans both feared and respected across the galaxy. Lyra, standing beside Kane, felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She had never imagined herself in a position of power over her oppressors. For years, she had been manipulated, coerced, and silenced, and yet now, with Kane, she had agency. She was not simply being protected, she was participating in her own liberation. Kane's confidence was infectious. He approached the confrontation not with rage, but with calculated force, demonstrating both physical prowess and strategic intelligence. It was a human approach that leveraged creativity, adaptability, and moral conviction, qualities that were rare and, in this universe, transformative. When the moment of confrontation arrived, the Valans expected compliance, intimidation, or even submission. Instead, they found Lyra fully present, aligned with Kane, asserting her autonomy and refusing to be reclaimed. Her voice, steady and commanding, declared that she was no longer property and would not be coerced by fear or familial obligation. Kane's actions reinforced her declaration. Any attempt to enforce their will was met with strategic opposition. The human's ability to anticipate moves, improvise, and act decisively left the Valens off balance, unprepared for a confrontation that combined strength with ingenuity. The psychological impact was profound. The Valen house, accustomed to obedience, faced humiliation and failure. Lyra, empowered by Kane's partnership, experienced a profound shift. She understood that the chains her family had placed on her heart could be broken not through revenge, but through courage, intelligence, and unwavering support from an ally who saw her as more than an asset. This moment crystallized a key HFY theme: humanity's qualities, resilience, ingenuity, moral courage, and respect for others' agency could redefine the balance of power in the galaxy. After the confrontation, the Valans retreated, their threats empty, their pride wounded. Lyra's sense of liberation deepened. She had faced the embodiment of her past oppression, and with Kane had not only survived, but asserted her freedom in a way that reverberated far beyond the immediate encounter. It was a turning point, not only in her journey toward personal liberation, but in her perception of what humanity could accomplish. A single human, acting with conviction and courage, had toppled the influence of a powerful alien house. With the confrontation against the Valen house behind them, Lyra and Captain Elias Kane entered a new chapter of their lives. The threat of her family's influence had been neutralized, at least for the foreseeable future, and the oppressive chains of her past were finally lifted. Yet freedom, as Lyra quickly discovered, was not merely the absence of captors or enemies. It was a state of mind, a conscious choice to live on one's own terms, and the cultivation of relationships based on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. In this newfound reality, Lyra's life began to shift in ways she had never imagined. Their journey took them across uncharted sectors of the galaxy. Kane's ship, nimble and well-equipped, allowed them to explore worlds untouched by colonization, war, or the interference of powerful alien houses like the Valans. For Lyra, every planet, asteroid field, and cosmic phenomenon was a revelation. The vastness of space mirrored the expansiveness of her possibilities. Unlike her previous life, where every step had been dictated by family ambition and societal expectation, she was now free to make decisions, to take risks, and to define her own identity. Every choice she made reinforced her independence, and with Kane beside her, she felt both supported and empowered. The relationship between Lyra and Kane evolved naturally during these travels. The bond formed in trust, respect, and shared experience deepened into love, though it was far from a rushed or simplistic romance. Kane admired Lyra's resilience, her sharp mind, and her moral clarity, qualities that had been honed through hardship but never diminished her innate humanity and compassion. Lyra, in turn, admired Kane's courage, ingenuity, and unwavering moral compass, qualities that made humans both unpredictable and formidable in the galaxy. Their interactions were a blend of mentorship, friendship, and partnership, evolving into a profound connection that neither had fully anticipated. One of the most defining aspects of their new life was their shared sense of purpose. They did not merely drift through space as fugitives from a powerful alien house, they actively chose to intervene where they could make a difference. On planets plagued by oppression, piracy, or ecological disaster, Kane and Lyra offered aid, combining his combat skills and tactical mind with her intelligence, insight into alien politics, and unique perspective as someone who had experienced exploitation firsthand. Together, they became a symbol of hope, demonstrating that courage, ingenuity, and moral conviction could triumph over systemic cruelty and fear. Lyra's experiences as a captive gave her empathy for those in need, while Kane's human decisiveness provided the means to act. Despite the adventures and challenges, there were quieter, tender moments that cemented their relationship. On the ship, they shared meals in the galley, discussed the peculiarities of human and Veylan culture, and reflected on the events that had brought them together. Lyra laughed freely in ways she had not since childhood, and Kane's humor and light-hearted teasing revealed a depth of warmth and connection that transcended mere companionship. These small, intimate moments were as important as their victories in battle or their confrontations with injustice. They represented the normalcy and emotional richness of a life they had both chosen, rather than one dictated by circumstance. Lyra's transformation was profound. From a girl sold into slavery by her own family, she had become a confident, independent, and self-assured individual. The experience of betrayal had taught her resilience, while her interactions with Kane had taught her trust, empathy, and the possibility of genuine partnership. More importantly, she had learned that love and freedom were not mutually exclusive. They could coexist, flourish, and strengthen one another. Kane's influence had not diminished her identity, it had empowered it. She was no longer defined by the chains of the past, but by her choices in the present and the boundless potential of her future. By the end of Part 5, Lyra and Kane were not just survivors. They were pioneers of a new life, a new dynamic in the galaxy. They embodied the HFY ideals of human courage, ingenuity, moral integrity, and respect for others, proving that a single human's actions, combined with partnership and trust, could reshape destinies, transcend species, and bring hope to the oppressed. Their story was not only one of rescue and romance, it was a testament to the transformative power of humanity across the stars. Lyra had been sold, betrayed, and enslaved, but in the arms of a human, she had found freedom, purpose, and love, creating a life that was entirely her own.